Good afternoon, and welcome to the Future of the IC Workforce Technology and Talent Transformation. Now, please welcome INSA President Suzanne Wilson-Heckenberg.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's installment of the INSA Foundation's 2024 Future of the IC Workforce Technology and Talent Transformation Series. Underwritten by GDIT and ClearanceJobs, this two-part series seeks to shine a light on issues impacting the IC's ability to attract and retain a talented and diverse workforce, specifically increasing representation in STEM careers. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping notes. If you have questions, and we hope you do, please submit them to the question box on the right side of your screen. Feel free to include your name and your organization if you would like. Our moderator will do her very best to get to all of your questions. We're pleased to welcome members of the press to today's program. As a reminder, this program is being recorded, and you will find the recording along with a recap on the website early next week. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce today's moderator. A long-standing friend of INSA's, Lindy Kaiser, is the Director of PR and Content at ClearanceJobs, the largest career site and online community dedicated to security cleared professionals. Lindy is a former Department of Army civilian and passionate advocate for improving the pathways into national security careers for both government and industry applicants. Lindy, thanks for moderating today, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne, and thank you to the Intelligence and National Security Foundation for putting together this program. Obviously, fantastic. What is a webinar without some audio issues? Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. Thank you to the Intelligence and National Security Foundation for your support. Thank you to GDIT for making this happen, for underwriting this content. I think this is such an important topic, and I love to see government, industry, the private sector, nonprofit community combining to really support this really important topic, which is addressing the future of the workforce supporting national security. So on that note, we're joined today by Joellen Adkins, Deputy Director of Human Development with NGA, also Aaron Bedrowski, Senior VP of Intelligence and Homeland Security at GDIT, and Lauren Bean-Buida, Founder and CEO of Girl Security. Thank you so much, all of you, for participating today. I talk really fast and try to move really fast, and that's because I want to get to as many questions as possible and make this an engaging conversation. And one of the things I love about INSA and INSIF is how they bring together all the different communities here. So I know across the questions we've already gotten in advance here, we have university represented, we have young people, we have folks who are senior within the intelligence community and supporting national security, and all of those voices are needed to address and create our future workforce to get national security into the next level. To solve what really is, if you talk to a lot of folks across OD&I and the national security community, we are kind of at this cusp of having this national security talent crisis. So again, all of you being here and participating in this webinar and this panel discussion, super important, and I'm super appreciative. My first question is just kind of, you are experienced professionals, experienced, seasoned. I'm starting to round up, like I'm close to 20 years and I'm owning it in supporting national security. So as seasoned professionals, you've gotten to see a breadth of changes across the IC workforce over those years. So I just kind of wanted to ask each of you, do you think there are critical or milestone changes that you've seen in the national security workforce across your tenure? What do you think those are? What are some of the monumental shifts you've gotten to experience over the course of a career supporting the IC? Super broad. Good luck, Joellen. I wanted to tee that to you first.
Lead off batter. Okay. So I would say that if you go back and you look at the 9/11 Commission reports and the WMD Commission report as well, and I happen to be involved with both in the capacity here as the NGA representative of both those entities. There were certainly a lot of discussion at both of the commissions about the lack of diversity, the lack of alternative analysis, and the inability to really make those decisions without having some sort of repercussion. So that having that ability to be transparent and honest with leadership, I've noticed since those two monumental commissions that I think really did help shape the current intelligence community, we've seen that that's changed quite a bit, and how analysts as well as the community is now really able to kind of question analysis and current thinking. There's more red teaming that goes on within the intelligence community. So for me, there's an increase in diversity of thought, diversity of people. You need that to really create that environment where you can change and evoke that change. So from my perspective, it's really about the diversity of thought and opinion that I've seen.
Okay, so same question to you, Erin. How have you seen the intelligence community workforce change over the course of your career?
Well, I think Joe Ellen really hit on the change that we saw following 9/11, but the other major event that probably happened, and we would probably be remiss without mentioning it, was COVID. And so the dynamics of the entire workforce changed in the post-COVID environment. So as we go to attract our talent and invest in places where we'll create partnerships in the post-COVID world, we sort of see opportunities, at least in industry, where we can now partner with academia to focus on areas like St. Louis, target a neurodiverse group of folks who are looking to transition their career into the IC industry. And then we're really actively engaging with our transitioning military service to attract and retain more diverse talent in our workforce. And as we all know, it's really about the concept of sort of meeting people where they're at in life and creating an experience where that provides them with accommodations needed, to set them up for success and give them a pathway and a career in the IC in just this different environment and post-COVID.
Okay, so same for you, Lauren. How have you seen the IC workforce change in the past, in your career?
I mean, I see it through the lens of girl security, which is we continuously just see an increased interest in the national security space. We began in 2019, where we had about 20 mentees, so high school age participants, interested in the military, interested in CIA, for example. And now we have almost 1,000 applicants to our mentoring program every year. So for us, we simply just see a rise in interest, which is really exciting. I think the challenges are many, right? We're reaching into communities where historically the intelligence community maybe hasn't been looking, who are attending colleges or universities or community colleges or other educational institutions that perhaps were not prioritized, or in fact, were not preferred historically. And I think on top of that, the nature of the skill set required to perform within the intelligence community is changing to some extent. So we have challenges that we're rising to around how do we take what we know about STEM representation, which is that you really have to get to diverse populations as soon as possible. For girls and women, they start to develop their identity around STEM careers, for example, as young as 5. So how do we make these careers more accessible to them sooner? And then how do we sort of take each barrier that the workforce presents and peel back its layers to best prepare them? And so there's a lot of challenges, but I think what motivates us, especially amid a time where trust in government may be low and there's other challenges in our environments, is demand for our program continues to rise. So that's quite motivating, and I think should be inspiring for people.
Okay, I want to talk about that a little bit more. So vision for technology and talent in this space, because obviously STEM is a focus of this. So we're thinking through how to kind of leverage maybe technology to build a better, IT workforce, national security workforce. Are there innovative ideas that you're seeing happening, examples within your companies or agencies where you're kind of harnessing the technology that's out there to help attract a new workforce? Right, AI is going to solve all of our problems, correct? Erin, do you have any examples of things that GDIT is doing and leveraging?
Yeah, I mean, so internal to the company, we've invested in a series of digital accelerators, and those digital accelerators are oftentimes staffed by interns, and so it really starts with our partnerships with targeted degree programs in universities that are somewhat geographically aligned to either our customer base or our company base, so that we create that experience where we can start early. Is Lauren said, quite nicely, is that when it comes to STEM and technology and the way that our customers buy, all of that is changing. You have to introduce more technology into solutions, and to attract that field of candidates, you really have to be a proactive, you have to reach out and into those organizations and get them engaged early and align them actually to some of the things where we see technology trends being applied to our various customer solutions. And so, for us, that's mostly AI ML. I think that's kind of, not necessarily unique to GDIT, but, an example was we are partnered in the St. Louis area with Gateway Global. We inform their curriculum, and we really target those individuals to align to like the NGA mission with Joellen and her organization, so that these eventually can become people who are in the clearance pipeline, who hopefully transition either to government service or to industry service in an area where it is underserved and requires really a partnership between government and industry to infuse that kind of participation in the community. And so that's one of the ways that we're trying to be creative and innovative in the search for talent.
And we talked before the call, the IC released its annual demographic report on 2023 workforce. There was a 7% gap for women in the overall workforce, higher than what you would see in the private sector. Additionally, the women's share of applicants into the IC was more than 10% points less than representation for women in the overall US population. And that stood out to me as pretty key, because we know the IC has invested a lot in getting more diverse applicants. So the fact that consistently we're still seeing a double-digit gap in women applying into those IC positions seems significant to me. So I know that's core work that you're doing, Lauren, and you spoke to that earlier about, the need to attract women into STEM careers early, age 5. Kind of what are some of the maybe successful areas that you're seeing to move that needle and say, how do we get that applicant number higher?
Yeah, there's so many challenges, I think, with respect to the IC, right? We have so many mentees in our program or alumni of our workforce training program who, in the midst of waiting for security clearance, just can't afford the process and then usually enter the private sector or go into another public sector. So I think the security clearance aspect is sort of one bigger monster that we all know exists. But I think from our perspective, if we just talk about STEM, the data around sort of STEM access among most high schools is less than 50%, even basic computer science programs. So you're starting with a population of young adults or adolescents who may aspire to careers but don't have access in their communities. And of course, the percentage of women who are pursuing computer science degrees has dropped off since the pandemic. So that's just sort of STEM. And then I think within the national security workforce, what I try to emphasize to folks is that every generation is a new opportunity to engage. So every time we engage with a high school in a new community, we have freshman through senior opportunities to elevate these career pathways for them. And every new year of students provides that new opportunity. So it does require a very robust investment, I think, of community-based engagement to make these careers not only accessible, but also desirable. A lot of the times we're also educating families and community-based organizations and social workers and career counselors about what these career pathways can provide in terms of economic mobility, having a sense of purpose. There's a civic aspect, also mobility across sectors in and out of the public and private sector. So I think the challenges, there are STEM-centered challenges that exist, and I would send people to, I think, what was a really great report from the Aspen Security Forum that we participated in, which was Pathways to Competitiveness. It sort of maps the STEM gap, STEM talent gap across critical national security technology sectors. But the findings are all the same, which is we need to invest in better STEM education access earlier on for more young people. And then I think if you add in the layer for girls and women, there's no question that the IC has its challenges with respect to workplace safety issues, issues related to sexual violence. Those stories make it to girls and women. They read those stories, they hear those stories. So I think a more holistic approach that takes an identity-centered awareness, which is that you're dealing with a population of girls and women who already are not represented in STEM, and then you're putting them into a space that they are still not largely represented in, which is national security broadly. So how do we provide that access to opportunities sooner? How do we elevate visible career role models that they can aspire to? And then how do we create better recruitment and engagement policies to keep them in the workforce once they're in it too? So there's a number of challenges, but they're all good challenges to try to tackle.
And some challenges, I think, Joellen, like your organization has tried to address some of that. And I want to go back to Lauren, what you said about the security clearance process and the lack of kind of information about that. I think that's something I've seen IC agencies, I think I've heard from NGA, trying to give more information to applicants, also creating a few different pathways and gateways to say, hey, we can give you uncleared work while you wait for a final clearance, or different things like that. Even information. I think CNAS did a study and they found young people were willing to wait if they just had some notion that it would ever come, or some timeline. But that's been a huge pain point. Has NGA addressed any of those different factors when it comes to onboarding, Joellen?
Well, what I would say is that the DNI has, and they put requirements in for intelligence community agencies that we have to really reduce that timeline. The goal is to 180 days, so, or less. Optimally, that would be less than that. But the bottom line is that I think every agency is trying extremely hard to try and figure out how do we do that, and where can we, find ways to really maximize the ability for people to come on board at a much earlier time than they have in the past. And we've made tremendous strides with that. But I want to hit the issue specifically about women. And I will say that NGA has taken concerted efforts to try and recruit women into NGA. It's not just women, but diversity in general. But for the most part, specifically to women, we've had the most women, female interns, I guess, this year than we have in previous years. So colleges, as well as high school interns. We also do a high school internship program as well. So we're really trying hard to reach out across the country to invite individuals to come to NGA from very diverse backgrounds, including women. So that's the first thing. The other thing I wanted to bring up were the tremendous benefits that you get in the government writ large, but you're talking about a flexible work schedule. You have perhaps childcare benefits that you can take advantage of, student loan repayment initiatives, advantage fitness program where you can work out when you're here, limited telework options at NGA. At other locations and other agencies, there is more telework opportunities for individuals. It just depends on where you go and what agency you go to. So the point is that I would say that the work-life balance is fantastic within the intelligence community, in my opinion. So I want to bring that out as, there are lots of other factors as to why women would want to and should consider the intelligence community, regardless of whether it's NGA or another agency.
And Jennifer Krishner asked a question that I loved. Hey, teeing up the questions. We would love to hear from you. Jennifer, thank you for your question. So she asked about belonging, which is a big buzz, right? We talk about belonging, but it is very important when it comes to the retention piece of it. And we tend to do somewhat okay at recruiting diverse populations, or at least getting out there. But the retention figures do show that it's a struggle to continue to retain diverse workers across their career. And that does tie into belonging. So Jennifer asked, how do we make leadership more accountable to creating those cultures of inclusivity and belonging that makes those professionals want to stay?
I'll just mention a couple of things. We've had a lot of success with something called the All Secure Alliance, which is an industry alliance working with girl security to develop intergenerational approaches. So oftentimes I think buy-in from leadership is critical, but we do something called reverse mentorship. So I think there is something also to be learned from younger generations where the concept of sense of belonging is more socialized than it may be at the leadership level. And I think one way of creating a sense of belonging, especially for a very differently socialized generation of young people that will continue to change because of technology is to develop more intergenerational models, giving space for feedback, trying to measure for the informal learning and growth and mentorship that happens simply by working across generations within the intelligence community. And I think belonging, I know it's a buzzword, but there's been so much data done by a lot of really key institutions about how a sense of belonging, especially in government service, is so vital for a number of different reasons. But because of, again, walking into spaces where you may still be the only woman or person of color, or openly, identifying as neurodiverse, any number of different identities. And so for us, we see, bringing young people, intergenerational approach is effective, helping leadership develop messages around belonging, for sure, and workplace safety, I would say broadly, and trying to develop metrics, right? I feel like the DEI backlash has really cut short the opportunity to analyze a return of investment on what DEI done in the way it's designed to do can do for national security, and giving the space for companies and institutions to actually measure the benefits of it. I hope that despite all of the backlash, that there's still space for us to be able to do that kind of work together.
Sorry, Lindy, if you don't mind, I'll jump in. And this is an exciting topic for me. We tend to have a lot of conversations around how do we attract talent, and that's where a substantial amount of investment goes. But sometimes people can feel like maybe the conversation falls off a little bit on how we retain our talent. And one of the things I love about GDIT, just speaking from the perspective of being here at the company, is our president Amy Gilliland's created what we call a placemat, and it really is about how we define our culture, and there's pillars to that, and it's bring more to the mission, it's make GDIT better every day, and it's be a company with a soul. But for me, it sort of lands on the culture component of that, of being a company with a soul, and that's how we actually both attract folks and retain them. And so for me, that's more like it's the employee experience that's wrapped up in that. We lead with integrity and compassion. We make GDIT as a workplace and a career destination of choice. All of the programs and engagements and the things we do are centered and focused around making that an experience and not just a job. And so we don't want to feel like a body shop to our employees. We really don't want them to feel like a brain in a seat, and more of an employee who has a career, who can get involved and engage in things. And that includes for us, like technologies, communities, and employee passions. We have employee resource groups, things that outside of their normal 9-to-5 job or 8-to-4 job, or wherever their hours may be, they can actually latch on to things that are of interest to them. If they're a veteran, if they're interested in a technology, if they're part of LGBTQ, there's a series of things that make them want to be here and want to stay and create a career, depending on, despite the fact that they're on one contract, they can go to another and they can go to another, because the experience here is one that they really enjoy. And so that's really how we're focused on retaining all of our employees, in particular our women and our people of color and others. But all of those things exist for our population base, and that to me is exciting. We see that in our numbers on the retention side.
No, I'm so glad you responded, Aaron, because I was going to make you respond, because I know some amazing people who work at GDIT, and that's one of the things that they talk about, is that culture of inclusivity, bringing your whole self to work, having that opportunity. And that's been a shift in the government contracting space. Shout out. It used to be very much, if you were a contractor, you were focused on bottom line. If you worked for the government, if you worked for Joe Ellen, you got to be focused on the mission. But if you worked for a contractor, that wasn't always there. So creating those cultures has been, I think, really key to helping to retain and build a workforce. And so that ties into a question Isabel asked about, it seems like there are a lot of women working kind of IC adjacent, I love that term, industries. They just they don't think, hey, working for the government is for them. So again, I'm going to tee this to you first, Joelle, and then if anybody else has a comment. I know the IC has tried to push that, right? Not just getting the entry-level college graduates, which you are really successful about, but how do you create on-ramps for the mid-career professionals, maybe somebody who's working in the DC Metro in a different career path, but has skills that they could bring into the government? Kind of, what does that look like in GA?
So it's interesting you bring that up, because I do know a number of young women who aren't sure exactly how they would fit into the intelligence community and the government. And they think that, okay, I'm going to work over here and then kind of dip my toe into the process at some point to try and see what I really want to do. And my advice to young women is just jump in. If that's something, if you want to work in the government, jump in. But I will have to say, the great ideas that are being worked on right now with OD&I is, how do you move in and out of government? I love that concept. I love that idea. We should not make somebody stay. The message shouldn't be, you have to stay in the government or you have to be in the private sector. You should be able to move in and out. That's why the D&I is coming up, the public-private talent exchanges, giving individuals that opportunity to work in the private sector, come back in, work in government. We have JDA opportunities to provide individuals that opportunity to perhaps, work elsewhere and then come back into the government. So the reason I bring that up is that I do completely understand what that issue is. But from a government perspective, yes, we reach out to lots and lots of different organizations. And it's not just, college and high school students. We reach out to numerous professional organizations. Power to Fly is one as well. And that's for women in STEM career fields. So we're looking at women and diverse populations, not just from an entry-level perspective, but those who are mid-career and even towards the end of their career. We want that diversity, and that experience is critical and important to us. That's the message that we've been sending to a lot of these different organizations.
And I can just add on to Joellen. I love that message, but the way that we sort of tackle that is we have a high school-based workforce training program, which is led by a remarkable group of people, including Condoleezza Rice and Michelle Flournoy, but also longtime IC practitioners. And really the idea behind that, with the foundation of it, is structured analytics, and then they get a series of different trainings as well as exposure to certifications in cybersecurity, AI, and we're building out quantum computing. But we feel that the most sort of ethical contribution we can make is to not just raise awareness about pathways, but actually train them with an enduring skill set that they can employ across the different career paths. And that also we can test our abilities against. We want to make sure we're training them with the skills that they need with the partners that we work with across government and industry. And so we have a national program, which is virtual. And then this fall, which we'll be announcing more about, but we'll be launching the first high school-based national security clinics, starting in the south side of Chicago and hopefully scaling up over the next few years. And the idea, again, is to localize the work. So to understand that there are opportunities within the intelligence community across industries, even in your own, quote unquote, backyard. But I think to Joellen's point, I have this dream, Joellen, where we create almost sort of like a civic model where people can serve across sectors, because it really does showcase the actual way in which national security occurs right across the public and private sectors, and sort of the sense of collaboration. And so I think another side of this is just talking to young people about the fact that the private sector plays a role in national security, and that there are intelligence opportunities within the private sector, so that they do have a holistic understanding. And I would just end with, I do think most young people are purpose driven. I do think at least the young women in our program, they're looking for purpose. And so it's really just connecting the many dots to get them there. But I want to co-conspire to create that hybrid training program across sectors, because I think there's something really critical to capturing talent in that idea.
Absolutely.
Even maybe I pile on here just a little bit, just give you sort of I talked a minute ago about sort of our internal mobility. I have a wonderful privilege to oversee the business that manages the IC and the Department of Homeland Security, but in the context of the greater General Dynamics Corporation here, we're one small organization of many. And so our internal mobility for people who want to have a career, who can move in and out of jobs around the IC or Homeland Security, they can move into other fields across the company. And so we put a lot of emphasis around talent management, career management. It's not just one contract, it's not just one organization. If you need training, we'll provide that for you. And so people can literally stay here from the time they leave high school or college all the way up to the time they retire, and do something different on a regular recurring basis, and pop in and out of our intelligence spaces, or our national security spaces, or our Defense Department spaces, into commercial spaces or product spaces or internationals and others. And so I think the program that we have here is a wonderful example of how you can do many different things without ever sort of changing the color of your badge necessarily. And I love Joe Ellen's, I hope that idea comes to fruition about people able to move into government and industry spaces. I see a lot of value, a tremendous amount of value on both sides of that fence. And just getting that different perspective will create that partnership going forward to solve challenges collectively. I think that's phenomenal, and I hope that comes to become a reality for sure.
I mean, we do see, I was just on a call with DCSA earlier, and they were talking about the enrollment of the non-sensitive public trust population into continuous vetting. So I do think we're gonna get wonky for a minute, but there is this movement to shift the way we manage the government workforce. There has never been oversight into that population before. It's been managed only at the agency level. I think as we get some oversight of that, that mobility could happen. I'm hoping, I'm hopeful. But I think there's another piece that ties into what you said, Lauren. Okay, strange thought here. I think there's opportunities to support national security and not have a security clearance, because I know INSA mentioned we had a ton of wonky security clearance questions come in. Every time I'm on a call, I get those. Love those. I want you all to obtain a security clearance, but if you can't or don't want to, there are still opportunities to serve national security. If you need a longer on-ramp, I know GDIT has great programs to sponsor students for security clearances, sponsor security clearances. But I'd love to, I don't know if you have thoughts on that, Lauren. I'm throwing a wild card at you, or even Joe Ellen, but I do think there's ways to serve in national security in those adjacent fields, and maybe, you know, as we figure out the security clearance process a bit.
Oh, I think so too. And I think some of the really exciting work occurs in the private sector. I mean, through our industry alliance, we have folks from Levi Strauss and Company and Cargill and Zoom and Starbucks, and folks working on critical infrastructure. You know, these companies are building their own sort of geopolitical, you know, almost national security contingencies. I think that's what's so remarkable about the space, and why we get so excited about our work, is every sector is touched by national security. And so it's in our best interest to try to communicate that there are pathways in national security across sectors. We hope many want to serve in government because it's meaningful, but if not, they're still contributing to sort of this greater good. And I think especially with artificial intelligence, where generative AI and the risk of influence and all of the things that we talk about, it's this space where it's a bit of the Wild West, or space, and the impact of AI in space and ethics. You know, we're working on trying to capture the future for young people to get them excited about the pathways. Again, many of which we hope occur within certain sectors, but know that that's just not going to be feasible for a lot of young people in our community who just can't afford to wait it out. They just can't afford it. And so I feel like for us, if we can get them into this space and get them interested, then there should be other opportunities for them to go in and serve at a later time.
I wanted to just to talk a little bit about exactly that type of example, and that's obviously in St. Louis, that St. Louis ecosystem, where you have NGA, second largest employer in St. Louis. You have the private sector, you have academia, everybody converging together to create that ecosystem. There's a tremendous opportunity for unclassified work that we're already doing in that ecosystem environment. And that has really taken off, and it's only going to be getting bigger and bigger and stronger. Our new building that we're building at NGA out west in St. Louis also has a large unclassified section where that's just going to continue that partnership. So I think you're exactly right. And Lindy, what you talked about before is how you kind of open that door to allow for greater participation not just people who have clearances, but maybe people have a secret clearance. They don't need a top secret clearance. It's quite possible you don't even need a top secret clearance for some of the issues that we work. What about just doing traditional unclassified work? Yes, we should be looking at different models for how we do business. And I think the St. Louis ecosystem is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, I love that. And I think conversations like this are so important. And we hope, this webinar gets wide exposure and we tell people it's like GDIT, the art of the possible. So what is possible, and just exposure to folks in diverse locations and areas. INSA is great at this. We're going to be in Denver next week. So if anybody's in Denver, come visit us in Denver. Like, the intelligence community, national security is at work at locations outside of the DC metro. So we need more people to just kind of get that exposure, right? Lauren, you talked about being from Illinois. As the young person growing up in Iowa that I was, nobody told me that I could support national security. My parents had no idea if I would ever be able to work when I majored in international affairs. They were positive I would be unemployable. Maybe that's true, but look at me now. I'm on a webinar. So Tina, Beth Schill at Georgetown, want to do a shout out to you. What advice would you give to career advisors trying to get people in, attract young people into the IC? All those career advisors at those DC colleges are getting a flood of young people saying, how do I get a job supporting national security? So I'd love to hear from each of you. Start with you, Joelle. Like, what is your advice that you give to those folks? What advice would you tell them to give, whether it's like skills, soft skills? What's that core advice?
Oh my goodness. I would say the biggest piece of advice is to figure out what is it that you want to do. In other words, you've got to have the passion. Okay, so just jumping into it is not going to do any good for the employer, for NGA, or for the IC, as well as for the person applying. Getting the right skill sets, absolutely. I'm sorry, but I'm looking right now at what we're hiring and what our strategic workforce plan is for the future. And I'm going to tell you this right now. For NGA, it is largely about STEM, 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 and STEM. Now, having said that, NGA, look at our mission. It's a little bit different than an all-source agency, okay? So we're looking for people that do have that strong background and they do have some kind of a technical background. But I will also say this, we're going to be looking more to the future where we're looking at teaming with technical, non-technical, everybody teaming together for a common purpose. So it isn't just about STEM, it's really about that passion that you have, trying to get some type of certification. If you're a poli-sci major, that's fantastic. Try and get a certification in something that's STEM related. That's going to look great on a resume, and that's going to look good to a future employer. That would be my advice.
Erin, I'll go. I was going to start clean up your social media accounts. That would be number one. Set things to private and get your LinkedIn page set up. But I think it's the same thing. I mean, I would start with high school career counselors. And, one of the projects that we're working on, and Joelle and I'm going to follow up with you about this, is providing high school counselors with a rubric of the competencies and capabilities that we're really talking about that allows for them to feel confident considering a lot of different pathways that may be STEM centered, but may also be, law, policy, any of the other pathways that are intersecting with national security and the intelligence community. I think finding an organization, I'm biased, but finding an organization like Girl Security as soon as possible is great because we have a career coaching competency in our organization. So someone who can help you, and I know all of the agencies have this, and it's all good. We're all contributing to the same thing. But the sooner that someone can engage with an organization that can dedicate its resources, I think that's always very helpful. And I think to Joellen's point, it's so critical. It's, we teach critical thinking, we teach computational thinking, and thanks to partnerships with folks like Google, we can offer certifications in cyber, in AI. But even just developing a basic working awareness of how the national security community is thinking about the future of work and socializing some of the concepts and key words and key frameworks, I think can be really a distinguishing variable for a lot of young people who are job seekers in this space as well.
Those are two really great things. And so in addition to that, I mean, I think what I would say is, we work in an area that it has, hundreds of thousands of people that are in this field. And I'm certain that most students probably have someone that's maybe not one or two sort of relationships removed from someone who can help them understand what the community is about, how it's structured, what the opportunities are, and how to then give them mentorship and advice on aligning their academic pursuits to their interests. Finding, like Lauren said, an organization, a company, a government agency that comes to their schools or to the places in where they have career fairs and proactively engaging with those people, getting involved. Seek internships from the variety of different avenues that are out there, and really, own that process and make sure that, if you find a roadblock in one area, you seek an opening in another, and just never give up. And don't forget that another pathway to intelligence community work or government service is also, serving in our military. And so that's really one of the easier ways to get a security clearance, get some practical experience, and then do the transition. So, all of those avenues I think are available to everybody in high school and to college folks. And so there should be lots of opportunity.
I love that you mentioned, groups, associations. Everyone knows I'm a huge fan of INSA, obviously. So like those kind of associations, and they're great about, you see students there every time. There's always students volunteering at their events, participating. If the hidden job market is real. I say that coming from ClearanceJobs. We kind of have created ClearanceJobs as a community, as an information hub, because information is how you're going to get access to opportunities. So looking for those information sources, joining associations, participating, volunteering, that's really going to open up avenues to career paths that, especially when it comes to national security, you're just not going to, aren't front page news, but there's a lot of cool things happening and ways to get involved. So a question, somebody asked about the St. Louis ecosystem and what role NGA's Moonshot Labs plays. So Joellen, can you speak to the Moonshot Labs a little bit?
Yeah, no problem. Big fan of Moonshot Labs. Okay, so it really is a location for just what I talked about before, which is academia, the private sector, and the public sector to all come together, whether it's working on a particular project or holding an event of some kind. I think the Pride event from the DNI was held there recently. We've had hackathons at Moonshot Labs. We also have a geomatics initiative going on right now with Moonshot Labs. So there are, it's a way to kind of sensitize people to the GeoInt community. And I think for anybody who's interested, if you're a student out there is listening and you're in the St. Louis area, one of the great things about Moonshot Labs is they do have events for students to come and to learn about GeoInt and to learn about it from not just the government side, but also from the private sector and from academia. So Moonshot Labs is extremely important. And like I said, we have the new building that we're building as well that's going to have kind of a similar mission space for the same kind of unclassified work that is being done at Moonshot Labs.
Awesome. And so another question, so when it comes to what needs to happen innovation-wise across the IC to actually enable some of the things that we're talking about, to create a more diverse workforce, are there key policy process shifts that you think need to happen? Or maybe ones, even Joel, and you've spoken to a few OD&I initiatives, key OD&I initiatives right now that are cornerstones to this, whether it's speeding up the clearance process, et cetera. Are there key policy or process movements at work or that need to be at work to really to move the IC workforce into the future?
Yes, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I think that ability to move in and out of government. What we're finding right now is that a lot of students, when they're coming out of college, especially, or even a little bit older, they don't want to stay wedded to one job. They don't want to stay wedded maybe to one agency. They want to have that flexibility to move in and out. So I think creating the environment that is conducive for that learning, whether you're in the government or in the private sector or going into academia, I think that's really important. That's critical. Are there policy changes? Maybe. I don't know exactly what they are, but sure, I would assume there probably are some down the road. But for me, it's really about that flexibility. And I think the more flexible we can be as an IC, the greater those opportunities will be to bring that right talent in, and they'll want to stay. They'll want to stay within that system so that they can kind of move in and out of government.
And then a question for you, Lauren. So about upskilling, reskilling. I know girl security really has a focus on the, the early on folks pursuing these careers, but a lot of folks who maybe are already a few years into their career and like, hey, I feel like STEM left me behind. Do you have advice, feedback based on your realm of experience to say, how do you get those folks on a pathway to pursuing STEM if they have that interest, but then women especially struggle with this, right? Seeing themselves in those career fields and in those opportunities.
Yeah, it's so funny too, because now some of the first mentees are mid-career from our organization and they're coming back for mentorship. So we just started a mid-career mentoring pilot. But I think that's what's great about, and it sounds like these resources are available elsewhere, but we have access to certifications. So they're cohort based, right? So women can go through a certification in cyber or AI with a cohort of other people who are sharing the experience and mentors who can help guide the process. But I think a lot of the times, some of the more innovative conversations we've been in have been around making education a national security priority, which again, I cited to the work the Aspen Security Forum has been forging that we've participated in. Is it's really thinking more innovatively about education, which is sort of the foundation upon which we will further innovate within the intelligence community and within national security broadly. And what does education innovation look like for the national security community, given what we know the skill set shortages are? And I always try to tell folks too, I think the most innovative strategy is engaging more than half the population in the most consequential sector in the world. And so thinking about progress as slow but steady, the populations that we're seeding now in high school, they may not be coming up. And in fact, we have curriculum that reaches the middle school levels. They may not be coming up into the workforce until five years, but we have 5 years, right, to perfect some of these challenges that we have so that we build that steady progress, although it may feel slow at times. And there may be things like the pandemic that disrupt statistics. And I know statistics are important, but I think it's one variable to assess within a much broader scheme of things that we witness on a regular basis.
And Erin, I'd love to have you touch on that too, because I know private sector is really good usually at that reskilling, certifications, kind of what pathways are within GDIT. Maybe if somebody's like, oh, I started out here, but I didn't have a STEM focus, but I really want to pursue this,
Yeah, so we have a learning engine, right? A whole education system in which, there's literally hundreds of free training courses that will allow someone to either expand the skills that they have in software development and engineering and cyber and AI and ML, you name it, it's there. And so all of that exists. We also have cohorts in order to train people who don't necessarily have maybe they have the basic skills but need more and practical experience, and so we'll run a series of cohorts that allow people to do not just upskilling but actually career switches. And Lauren, I love what you said a minute ago about attracting people to STEM. One of the other things that we do when we engage college and high schools is we'll hand out the lingo coding kits. And so those are really the self-paced home learning coding kits that are designed really to get people interested in, is this something I really want to do, and let me go and practice it in an environment where there's no grade at the end, there's no pressure or test. I can do it at my own pace, and if I like it, then I can go and explore other things. And so, we've handed out hundreds of these things already this year, and we'll continue to do that as we engage that populace that may be thinking about a STEM career, but may not really understand what it means or how to get involved.
I was just going to add on to what you said, Erin, and what you said, Joellen, is what I think is so cool about what you're talking about is a culture of lifelong learning. And I think that sort of reflects trends, right? Maybe young people don't want to stay in the same job in a way that prior generations did But I don't think that's because they're not motivated. I think it's because they have an appetite for an interdisciplinary skill set. And I also think, Erin or Joellen, you mentioned it, that's why we also do tabletop exercises all of the time, red teaming, because we want them to see that they can start in one path, but if they burn out or if it just doesn't become something they're passionate about, they can transition to something else. So that sort of culture of lifelong learning, I think I'm inspired to hear it because it's exciting for us to be able to go back and tell people that there are places that are evaluating that. And there are two, I wanted to flag for folks, I would put the link in, but 2 recent reports by McKinsey on the future of work. And it's something you touched on as well, Erin, I think, which was employee value proposition, right? You know, these things don't sound innovative, but they actually are very innovative if we think about what the goals of innovation are, which is attracting and retaining people, and the diversity of the population, which, to Joellen's earlier point, will just yield more informed intelligence outcomes for the work that we all care about.
I love that. I know we're getting close to the conclusion of this. We're gonna hold off the screen a little bit, but I wanted to give each of you a chance to kind of do a final question. You can either answer what I ask or pretend I asked something else and give your own closing soliloquy. I don't care. But my thought process here is every time I get in these conversations, I get excited for national security work anew. Like, love talking to you, Joellen and Lauren and Erin, because we're doing cool things. So from each of your vantage points, kind of what gets you excited about this Gen Z or Gen Alpha? We're going to get them yet. Lauren's going Gen Alpha. She's there. So what gets you excited about getting that workforce into national security careers? Joellen, you're first.
I would say it's all about the mission and how we can do it better, faster, and more efficiently. And I would absolutely say that the young people today who are coming into the workforce are proving that exponentially. We need them, we want them, we value them.
Erin, you next.
Joel, I love that. I mean, some of the interns I've run into are absolutely brilliant. They run circles around folks like me, and it really is a pleasure to engage them. And maybe just a quick close on something you talked about earlier in the terms of getting work outside the DC metropolitan area, meeting the workforce kind of where they're at in the locations where, even, think about Huntsville, Alabama, and Augusta, and San Antonio, and St. Louis. I mean, there's all sorts of different geographic locations where we can expand ourselves and attract those folks, so they don't necessarily have to be in our DMV bubble here. But I think it's a crawl, walk, run, because it's an incredibly complex issue around doing unclassified work, transitioning to the sort of the mid-secret level kind of stuff, and then doing the TSSCI. And so that does require us to have a partnership around what policies need to change, what mindsets and cultures need to change in order for us to get there and get that younger workforce who want to have their cell phones and their iPads and their other things readily accessible, if not immediately accessible, all day long. So I'm looking forward to continuing to engage in that dialogue across the board with both customer and policymaker and industry.
I get up every day and I love what I do. I mean, there's every new population we engage, if we survey them, 100% are interested in national security because they've never been exposed to it. So it's our opportunity to lose. And I just don't think we need to do that. And my colleague said something I think is very important to go back to belonging, which is when we talk to young people, we need to let them know that not only do they belong, but we want them, we need them. And I think that message is very powerful at a time when the workforce looks very scary for a lot of young people across demographics, across socioeconomic status. So it's the opportunity for us to create, and I'm delighted to be with all of you.
And thank you to Joellen and Erin as well for sharing your insights with us this afternoon. I, for one, learned a great deal today. And once again, a shout out to GDIT for underwriting the series. Our next installment takes place on Monday, September 16th, and will include Kim King, DIA's Career Services Manager for Analysis, and the Honorable John Sherman, who is in a new role now. He was the former DoD CIO, and now he is the current dean at the Texas A&M Bush School for government and policy. Thanks to all of you all for watching online and for joining us this afternoon. And when the webinar ends, just please take a moment and fill out a very short survey. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thanks again.